The old man didn't flinch. Not when the fake HOA enforcers kicked in the gate. Not when they pointed their plastic badge authority in his face. Not even when one of them raised a crowbar. He just sat there on the porch, cleaning the barrel of a 1948 Colt like he was buttering toast. Bang! That was the moment the whole neighborhood learned what grandfathered in really meant. I inherited the property on a Monday, but by Tuesday, I knew it was going to be a war zone. Grandpa called it his slice of sovereign soil, 6 unkempt acres tucked behind the kind of subdivision that names its streets after birds it chased off. Blue Jay Way, Sparrow Ridge, Mockingbird Lane, fitting, in hindsight. The house was a weather-beaten farmhouse with a rusted windmill, a sagging front porch, a goat pen that smelled like rebellion, and a line of homemade no trespassing signs Grandpa painted himself, each one more aggressive than the last. The first time I pulled up the gravel drive, the goats stared at me like I was late. I wasn't just inheriting a house, I was inheriting a standoff. See, Grandpa's land existed in a loophole older than Karen Pendleton's Botox schedule. The 1947 deed was handwritten in pencil, notarized in bourbon, and grandfathered in before HOAs even learned how to sniff out violations. He'd served in Korea, came home, and made damn sure no one could ever tell him what kind of wind chimes to hang or how long a daisy could grow before it became a federal offense. His best friend, Hank, had gone on to work in zoning and helped carve out a perimeter of protection around the land. "They'll come sniffing," Grandpa told me once, staring out from his porch swing, a loaded Colt resting on the windowsill. "Wait long enough, they always do, but this land doesn't bend." I laughed back then. I'm not laughing now. The moment I moved in, the neighborhood noticed. The HOA sent their welcoming committee, Karen Pendleton herself, strutting up my driveway in an outfit that screamed petty authority and yoga mat supremacy. She had a clipboard in one hand and a faux concerned smile plastered on her face. "Just wanted to introduce myself," she chirped, nose wrinkling at the goat smell. "And let you know the porch doesn't quite match our visual guidelines. Uniformity helps home values." I didn't shake her hand. I just leaned against the doorframe and said, "This house isn't in your kingdom, ma'am. It's protected." Her face twitched like someone had just slapped her with a property line. "No such thing," she said too quickly. "All homes in the Willow Ridge vicinity fall under HOA oversight." "Not this one," I replied, handing her a copy of the 1947 exemption deed. "This house is as free as the chickens it came with." Her lips tightened into a smile that could split stone. "Well," she said, stepping back, "we'll see about that." That was the first shot. The next came in the form of a bright yellow courtesy notice tucked under my windshield wiper the very next morning. No HOA header, no signature. Just a generic list of violations: non-standard mailbox, livestock containment issues, fence discoloration, and excessive rustic elements. The mailbox in question was painted like the American flag and signed in Grandpa's handwriting, "Come and get it." I laughed, then stapled the notice to a board and nailed it to the goat pen. By Friday, another one arrived. Saturday night, I caught someone hand-delivering it in the dark. No lights, no car in sight. They bolted when I stepped onto the porch with Grandpa's Colt resting lazily on my hip, just out of its velvet-lined case. It hadn't been fired since '78, but it still had 6 rounds and enough family history to give the average trespasser religion. That's when I started digging. Not in the ground, but through Grandpa's barn, which wasn't really a barn so much as a time capsule, preserved in dust and spite. Inside was a typewriter with a bullet lodged in the platen, a shelf of canned peaches from 1969, and a stack of military records so thick it made the Vietnam archive look like light reading. But what mattered most was the vault. Built into the back wall, disguised behind an old NRA poster, the vault was covered in dust and had a rotary combination lock that clicked like it wanted revenge. Inside were Grandpa's war medals, his honorable discharge papers, and a file folder marked, "For when they come." Inside that folder was the gold notarized documentation of the 1947 deed, a notarized exemption From the 1980 formation of the Willow Ridge HOA, legal correspondence citing state-level grandfather laws, and an official boundary map signed by Hank the zoning wizard himself. It was airtight, bulletproof, HOA repellent. I made 20 copies and hid them in every corner of the property, including one in the goat's water bucket. Paranoia? Yes, but earned. That same weekend, I noticed 2 black SUVs parked at the edge of the property line. No plates, tinted windows, parked at odd hours, always facing the house. I spotted the same vehicle following me to the feed store, to the gas station, even to the DMV. I ran the plates. Nothing. Just blank. One night, I walked out to the edge of the yard, hands up. "You boys lost?" I called. One of them stepped out. Vest, mirrored sunglasses at night, and a patch on his chest that read, HOA Compliance Division. My jaw dropped. I couldn't help it. I actually laughed. "You're not law enforcement," I said. "That badge is made of plastic." "This is a compliance patrol," he said, voice rehearsed like a mall cop on his first power trip. "We're authorized to verify community standards enforcement." "On private property?" I asked. "That's not in your little handbook, son." His hand drifted to his belt. "Not a gun, a clipboard." "We can issue warnings," he muttered. I stepped closer. "Step on my land again and you'll get more than a warning." That's when the second SUV's door opened, and another man stepped out. This one in plain clothes but with a camera and what looked like a body cam rig. "Documenting violations," he said, already recording. "This entire area's under HOA jurisdiction." I didn't even speak. I just walked back to the porch, opened the screen door, and reached into the umbrella stand. Grandpa's Colt rested there, oiled and gleaming. I didn't even point it. Just cradled it like I was polishing silver. The camera guy stopped filming. The other one backed up fast enough to trip on a sprinkler head and land in the grass like a sack of flour. They left in silence. By Monday morning, someone had painted HOA scum on my goat pen. My trash pickup was missed for the first time in 20 years. My mail got lost. One neighbor stopped me to whisper, "Karen says you're a threat to the community." I didn't respond. I just kept walking, Colt tucked in my waistband, the original deed in my back pocket, and a goat named Burrito trailing behind me like a tiny, hairy bodyguard. Because this wasn't just property anymore. This was Grandpa's last hill, and I was ready to die on it. It didn't take long for the air to change. One day I was the weirdo with goats and a windmill. The next, I was the neighborhood pariah. People who used to wave stopped midair like their arms remembered. I existed, but their faces refused to follow through. Mrs. Habersham, who once brought over lemon bars and talked about her cat's anxiety for an hour straight, now crossed the street to avoid me, even when I was just hauling firewood. Overnight, my trash pickup became optional, not because I forgot the day, but because Waste Pro couldn't access my bin past a phantom obstruction. Spoiler, there was no obstruction. Unless you count the HOA volunteer who parked their Prius sideways across my driveway that morning. My property line flags, the ones that had stood since Grandpa planted them in 1981, began to disappear, one by one, always at night. I'd replace them. The next morning, another would be gone. The ground left smooth, like someone had a vendetta against stakes and fluorescent orange tape. Then came the violations. A bright orange slip fluttering on my screen door. Weed height in excess of ordinance limit. I stared out at the frozen patch of grass dusted with January frost. The only green thing on my land was a weathered wreath still hanging from the barn and the moss on the north side of the goat pen. I took a photo of the alleged weeds and sent it to the HOA office, asking them if ground-level moss now violated state law. They didn't reply. Instead, I got a second violation, this one for uncontained livestock odor. I walked out to find Karen Pendleton standing on the edge of the easement, flanked by 2 goons who looked like they'd failed the police academy but passed cosplay boot camp. Both wore tactical vests with "Compliance Officer" stitched in bold white letters. One had an earpiece. The other held a tablet, like he was about to drop coordinates on a missile strike. "You've refused to address multiple citations," Karen said, lips pursed like she was tasting vinegar. "We're here to inspect for fire hazards and potential hoarding conditions in the barn." "Hoarding?" I asked, incredulous. "You mean Grandpa's tractor and 4 bales of hay?" "We've received anonymous reports," she sniffed. "And under Section 12 of the Community Safety Code, the HOA has the right to perform emergency inspections." I pulled a folded piece of paper from my back pocket. The same cease and desist letter I'd sent her last week, reprinted, underlined, and annotated in red. "This land is not under your jurisdiction," I said. "This barn is protected by a historic structure designation. And you," I added, pointing to the vest, "wearing twosome, are trespassing. Non-compliance will result in escalation," one of them said, his voice deep but wavering. "You have 5 seconds to step off my property," I said, my voice calm. "Or I call the sheriff and my lawyer at the same time and watch which one gets here first." Karen smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You'll regret this." She turned, heels crunching across the gravel, and her goons followed, one of them muttering "psycho" under his breath. They left, but the war had only started. 2 days later, I opened my mailbox to find 3 dead rats, stuffed inside a brown paper bag. No note, no signature, just a grim little bundle of intimidation and disease. The goat pen was next. I woke up to find the latch busted, the goats missing, and a half-scrawled message in chalk on the barn wall: "Get out." I found Burrito 2 hours later down the road near the creek, limping and scared. The others came back on their own, thanks to the emergency oat stash I scattered in the driveway. But the message was clear: someone wanted me gone, and they weren't playing by the rules. When I called the sheriff, I got the same tired response: "This sounds like a civil dispute. You should speak with the HOA board and try to mediate." I asked if they considered vandalism, theft, and animal harassment civil. The deputy just sighed and promised to note the call. The next day, my shed was broken into. Not robbed, broken into. Nothing taken, but every drawer opened, every tool rearranged, like someone was looking for something, or just wanted to make it clear they'd been there. That night, I sent my drone up. 30 minutes past midnight. It picked up 2 figures in dark clothes skulking near the edge of my property, flashlight beams cutting through the trees by the well. I zoomed in. Karen. And one of the same fake compliance officers, camera in hand, whispering something while pointing at the barn. My well, my land, my rules. I called Judge Hardwick the next morning, Grandpa's best friend, a retired state circuit judge with a ranch 2 towns over. I told him everything. By that evening, I had a formal letter on his firm's letterhead, 3 pages citing state statutes, pre-HOA exemptions, historic property clauses, and my right to defend my land. We mailed it to the HOA, CC'd it to the County Planning Commission, the sheriff, and every resident within a half-mile radius. We even posted a copy on my gate in a clear plastic sleeve with the caption, "For your reading pleasure, Karen." They didn't care. The HOA never even acknowledged it, but they escalated. Karen gave an update at the next HOA meeting, referring to me as a potentially dangerous and unstable individual, holding the community hostage with vintage weaponry and livestock intimidation tactics. I wasn't even there, but the quote made its way back to me via a neighbor who recorded the entire thing on his phone and slipped me the footage with an apologetic shrug. I went back to the barn that night and checked the Colt, still loaded, still clean, still ready. The next morning, I woke up to noise. Not just noise, boots. I could hear them crunching on the gravel before I even opened the curtains. 5 of them this time. Karen, 2 goons from last time. 2 new ones. No uniforms, just khakis and branded polo shirts with a logo that read Community Oversight Division. One had a camera, the other had bolt cutters. They didn't knock. They headed straight for the barn like they had a warrant from God. I stepped onto the porch with the Colt cradled in my left hand, not pointed, not raised, just visible. "You're trespassing," I said. "Leave now." The lead guy, A big man with sunglasses and a clipboard laughed. "We've had enough of your games. You've got 5 seconds to stand down or we—" He didn't finish. I didn't wait. I cocked the hammer. Then I fired. Not at him, not at anyone. Just a clean warning shot into the dirt 6 inches from his boot. The sound cracked across the morning like judgment. Birds scattered. Someone screamed. The clipboard hit the ground like a body. Karen nearly fainted. "This is a federal violation," one of them shouted. "That was a live firearm." "That was the sound of you leaving," I replied. "Now." They backed away, dragging Karen by the elbow. No one looked me in the eye, not even the guy who'd laughed. That evening the sheriff actually called, said they'd received a complaint about gunfire, and wanted to know if anyone had been injured. I told him there were no injuries, only egos. He asked if I'd consider resolving the issue through mediation. I asked if he'd consider getting a real badge instead of waiting for Karen to laminate one for him. He hung up. I sat on the porch until sundown, Colt resting across my lap, watching the same black SUV idle at the end of the drive. They didn't get out this time. They didn't try anything. And when the goats wandered up and lay down beside me, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the next courtesy notice they'd dropped, and used it to wipe a smudge off the Colt's barrel. The war wasn't over. But now they knew I was done playing defense. Turns out Grandpa had one last card tucked up his flannel sleeve, and it wasn't just the .45 Colt or that ancient notarized deed. It was the designation, the one thing Karen and her clipboard brigade hadn't seen coming. While digging through the barn's filing cabinet in a fit of insomnia and bourbon clarity, I found it sandwiched between a 1,983 fishing license and a dusty Ziploc of what I thought was jerky but turned out to be dried tobacco. A brittle manila folder labeled State Archive, Historical Agriculture Preservation Program. Inside was a formal state certification, dated 1991, declaring the land a protected historical agricultural site, issued by the Department of Rural Heritage and Land Conservation. Apparently, Grandpa had filed it after a bureaucrat from the county threatened to fine him for raising goats too close to a suburban perimeter. Grandpa responded by getting the whole place state verified, down to the rusted tractor in the shed and the windmill that creaked like a haunted accordion. The barn, officially listed as a regional example of pre-war agrarian craftsmanship. In other words, touching it without state approval was the legal equivalent of slapping a bald eagle during the national anthem. My lawyer, Judge Hardwick, retired circuit judge, poker shark, and Grandpa's best drinking buddy, nearly spit coffee on his wingtips when I showed him the document. "This," he said, grinning like he'd just drawn a royal flush, "isn't just a trump card. This is a nuke." We drafted a formal injunction within the hour. Along with the historical certification, I included drone footage of Karen's crew crossing the property line, screenshots of their fake compliance badges, and, just for flair, a highlighted transcript from the HOA minutes, the ones they claimed showed unanimous board support for inspection raids. Problem was, I'd gotten a copy of the unedited Zoom recording from a sympathetic neighbor named Darlene, and in that recording, the vote, Karen claimed, had passed unanimously, never happened. In fact, the only time my name came up, someone suggested sending me a letter once things cooled off. Karen didn't like that, so she adjourned the meeting early, then later fabricated a vote in the official notes. Forgery, misrepresentation, false entry of public record. I stapled all of it together with a little pink binder clip and called the courthouse. 48 hours later, we had a hearing. Karen didn't show. She sent a lawyer, one of those slick suburban real estate types who wears purple socks and calls everyone buddy. He claimed I was overreacting and making a mountain out of a molehill. Judge Barnes, a man who looked like he chewed iron filings and farted gravel, leaned forward and said, "Mr. Wilson, this man's property is legally exempt, state protected, and supported by a restraining order I am issuing effective immediately. Your client and anyone acting on behalf of the Willow Ridge HOA is forbidden from entering, surveilling, citing, photographing, inspecting, or otherwise interacting with this property in any capacity. The lawyer turned pale. I turned to Hardwick and mouthed the words, "Nuclear option deployed." 2 days later, the story hit the local news. I hadn't planned on it. I figured the small-town grapevine would take care of it. But someone leaked the footage from the most recent HOA raid, the one where Karen's squad of weekend warriors attempted to perform an emergency inspection of my barn again. The video, taken from my drone and enhanced by my cousin for social media, showed a grown man in a tactical vest tripping over my border collie Molly and landing face first in a trough full of chicken feed. He screamed. Karen screamed. Molly barked like she'd just defended the Alamo. The man broke his wrist. Karen blamed me. But the public? They laughed. Hard. The video got picked up by a local comedy podcast called Suburban Showdowns, who played it with banjo music in the background. Suddenly, I wasn't a dangerous, non-compliant loner with goats and a Colt. I was the eccentric folk hero fighting off the Stepford regime. A local bakery started selling Colt cookies shaped like revolvers. Someone painted my mailbox in gold. Karen, predictably, panicked. And when Karen panics, she overplays her hand. She called a neighborhood security emergency, claiming that my property posed a threat to community morale and cohesion. With that logic, so did yard gnomes and freedom of expression. She hired a new set of compliance agents, this time in matching polo shirts with a new logo, Neighborhood Safety Reconnaissance Corps. I Googled the acronym, NSRC, and found nothing except a defunct roller derby team in Tulsa. They weren't police, they weren't licensed security. One of them carried a baton made of PVC pipe. Another had a utility belt stocked with zip ties, a can of Monster energy drink, and a plastic whistle. Their gear looked like it had been ordered from a surplus cosplay site. And still, they acted like they were gearing up for a mission behind enemy lines. That enemy? Me, Grandpa's Colt, and a herd of disgruntled goats. I wouldn't have known about the next move if it weren't for Theo, my neighbor 3 houses down, a quiet veteran with a yard full of model airplanes and a record collection that would make a DJ weep. He knocked on my door one evening and handed me a thumb drive. "They're planning a final sweep," he said. "Karen wants to make one last statement before the board votes on her removal. Midnight inspection. No permits, no warrant. Just fake badges and big egos." I thanked him. Then I turned to the closet where Grandpa's legacy sat. Not the Colt, but the wiring. The motion sensors. The old-school tripwires he'd set up long ago when the coyotes started getting brave and the kids from town thought stealing pumpkins was a sport. I spent the next hour checking each node. Grandpa didn't believe in wireless security systems. His idea of smart home tech was a fishing line rigged to a cowbell and a switch that activated floodlights made from repurposed tractor beams. I connected the system to my camera network, made sure the infrared was working, and checked the battery backups. Then I waited. Midnight came quietly. No headlights, no engines. Just soft footsteps in the grass. Too careful, too quiet. The kind of quiet that only means trouble. They moved in formation, Karen, 2 officers, and a 4th guy holding a clipboard, like it was a riot shield. They made it 10 feet into the yard before the first light snapped on. The second caught Karen mid-squat behind a compost bin. The third? That one caught everything. The high-def camera panned just in time to record Karen shrieking, "Get the gun! Get the gun!" Even though no one had pulled a weapon yet. She pointed at the porch like she expected a SWAT team to rappel from the rafters. But what she got was Grandpa, or rather, a 4K video of him from 10 years ago, rigged to a motion trigger. He stood in his favorite flannel, Colt in one hand, shovel in the other, saying calmly, "You have 5 seconds to leave." It was recorded during a county fair he didn't want to attend. Now it played like prophecy. Karen dropped her clipboard. One of her officers wet himself. The footage, thanks to Theo's timely upload and my cousin's editing skills, hit the internet by morning. "OA President Screams at Ghost, Flees Lawnmower Lights," was the headline on the meme. "This man is a national treasure," said the most liked comment. "Protect him and his goats at all costs." Karen tried to file a harassment claim. The judge laughed her out of the hearing. literally laughed, said it was the most entertaining case he'd seen in 20 years. As for me, I kept the Colt locked away. The camera stayed up, the motion sensors stayed wired, and the next time I got mail from the HOA, it was a resignation letter. Karen was gone. The fake cops disappeared, and Grandpa, long gone but never silent, had once again protected the land he loved. Poetic justice doesn't always ride in on a white horse. Sometimes it rolls up in a government-issued Ford Crown Vic with 2 agents in matching windbreakers and a clipboard thick enough to choke a bear. That was the scene 1 week after Karen's infamous midnight meltdown hit the local news and went statewide. Her compliance officers, the 2 tactical sport LARPers who liked to threaten neighbors with zip ties and clipboards, were finally identified. The one with the mirrored Oakleys and airsoft holster? A former strip mall rent-a-cop fired for chasing teenagers with a taser he bought on Craigslist. The other? He was wanted in 2 counties for impersonating a federal marshal and had once tried to handcuff a drive-thru employee for giving him the wrong sauce. They'd both signed fake contracts under the name HOA Enforcement Division, which, as it turns out, is not a real legal entity, no matter how many patches you sew onto a khaki vest. The DA's office charged them with criminal impersonation, unlawful surveillance, and trespassing. When they found out Karen had been paying them through off-the-books HOA security grants, the dominoes started falling like they'd been greased in goat butter. Karen herself was hit with 3 formal charges: harassment, falsification of records, and attempted illegal seizure of protected private property. She tried to argue that she was ensuring neighborhood safety. The prosecutor countered with video footage of her shrieking at a motion-triggered recording of my dead grandfather and nearly tripping over her own clipboard. Her defense fell apart faster than her eyelash glue in a heat wave. The state fined her personally. The HOA board tried to distance themselves, but it was too late. Hardwick and I, with help from 3 very angry neighbors, including Theo, Darlene, and the Thompsons, whose daughter's swing set was once flagged as a visual disturbance, filed a countersuit. We didn't just want damages. We wanted the HOA board dismantled, its bylaws dissolved, and its bank account audited to the marrow. We subpoenaed every financial record going back 10 years. Turns out, Karen had been redirecting funds meant for park maintenance into community watch enhancements, which translated roughly to more polo shirts and cheap walkie-talkies. We uncovered payments for tactical training hosted by her cousin's gym, invoices for fake badge fabrication, and the pièce de résistance, a $5,000 receipt for a full-color foam core standee of herself holding a flag, allegedly meant for 4th of July parades. We submitted all of it in court. The judge didn't just rule in our favor. He roasted the HOA board like a rotisserie chicken. "This is not a homeowners association," he said. "It's a cosplay militia with a checkbook." The courtroom laughed. Karen cried. The ruling dissolved the existing board, nullified all fines, ordered restitution to every resident wrongly cited, and permanently barred Karen from holding any community leadership position anywhere in the state. The news ran the headline: "Neighborhood Tyrant Brought Down by Goats, Guns, and Grandfathered Law." I printed that article and laminated it. Still hangs in my outhouse. Karen put her house on the market 3 weeks later. She had to disclose the lawsuits, the pending judgments, the charges, and, my personal favorite, the legally binding clause that prevented her from ever setting foot on my property again. She listed it at $780,000. It sold for $670,000. That $110,000 loss, paid for in silence and shame. She left in a rented U-Haul, her security officers, now under house arrest, and her precious clipboard shattered on the front porch like a warning to the next would-be tyrant. With the HOA board gutted, the remaining residents formed a new community committee, and this time, we did it right. We called it the Willow Grove Council, and its founding principle was written by me and unanimously approved at the first meeting. Legacy property is sacred. Old barns matter. And if your zoning map doesn't reach us, neither does your authority. We limited terms, capped dues at $50 a year, and outlawed anonymous complaints. You want to file a violation now? You have to do it in person, with pie. And you better have a damn good reason. The HOA patrol SUV, once a symbol of our suburban police state, was repurposed by the kids down the block. We helped them convert it into a lemonade stand, painted it bright yellow with flames on the hood, called it Civic Juice. First cups free for anyone who's ever been fined for wind chimes. Grandpa's Colt was cleaned, sealed in a shadow box, and mounted above the new barn entrance. We held a dedication ceremony. Molly barked. The goats head-butted the refreshment table. Everyone clapped. We screwed in a brass plaque beneath it that reads, "In defense of peace and chickens, 1948. That barn, once targeted for demolition by the clipboard cavalry, is now a local landmark. A homeschool group tours it once a month. They bring cookies and ask about the windmill. I tell them it moans at night when the wind hits just right, like it's still remembering the night Karen ran into a wheelbarrow and blamed the devil. I still sit on the porch most evenings, still keep the lights low, still sip lemonade with too much sugar and just enough bourbon. The porch swing creaks with history. The flag flaps above the goat pen. The mail comes on time now, and the garbage always gets picked up. I watch folks walk by, neighbors, not enemies, and I nod. Sometimes they nod back, sometimes they wave. One afternoon, a young couple moved into the house across the street, freshly painted, no violations pending, no tactical vests in sight. The guy walked over, no clipboard in hand, just a dog on a leash and a six-pack of beer. He looked around at the pasture, the goats sunbathing, the golden colt glinting on the barn. "This place yours?" he asked. "It is now," I said. "Looks peaceful," he said. "It is," I replied, raising my glass. "Hoe free and gunpowder fresh." He smiled and tipped his hat. "Nice day, huh?" I leaned back in my chair, boots up, goats snoring on the porch beside me. "Sure is." And with that, we sat in silence. The kind of silence that only comes after a war's been won, a tyrant's been ousted, and the land, stubborn, sacred, and beautifully out of step, has been defended with honor. Grandpa would have been proud.